Hi, this is Scott Arnaud here today to talk a little bit about basic security awareness. Today's topic is mobile devices. Mobile devices mean smartphones, tablets, and can even include wearables like a Fitbit. Generally speaking, if you're connecting to your organization's computer network, there's going to be some risk there because attackers can use that as a potential on-ramp for an attack. Typically, programs you might encounter would be what are called BYOD, or Bring Your Own Device programs. There are also something called COPE, which is Corporate-Owned Personal Enabled, which is not as common. That's where it's their phone, but they're letting you use it. Normally nowadays it's your phone, but you're connecting to the network. And that'll include, obviously, Android phones, iOS phones, like Apple's, and to some extent, Windows 10 mobile phones, to the extent they're out there. Typically, these are controlled by what are called mobile device management software. If you're in a position where you're actually managing your firm, that's something you want to look into. There are numerous ones available. More popular ones are Good Technology, which was bought by BlackBerry recently, and Mobile Iron. Now, I'll post a little link along with this video, which will give you some reviews based on a number of them. That way you can take a look, see which ones might fit your company if that's something you're concerned with. So there are a few primary threats to this. First one I would mention for mobile devices is loss and theft. Because if a device isn't properly protected, just plugging it into a computer can basically retrieve a treasure trove of info just via the device's media manager. Also, what you want to look at are apps and permissions. So you have app stores out there where you get a lot of these things, and both Apple's App Store and Google Play Store will make efforts to keep malware out of their offerings. Now, their one's perfect, but they try. However, the vast majority of the thousands of third-party app stores available online don't do that, and using them is a little like playing Russian roulette with your phone. Obviously, you should avoid fully functioning free versions of apps that are normally paid by any off-brand app marketplaces. There's a reason that looks suspicious, and chances of them containing malware are about 100%. Now, also, if you have an Android device, in your settings will be a checkbox for allow downloads from unknown sources. That checkbox is left off by default. Leave it that way. That affects both third-party app store downloads and silent surreptitious malware trying to sneak on your phone in the background. Now, as for permissions, both Android and iOS allow you to adjust app permissions after you have downloaded them, as long as the device has Android 6.0, which is Marshmallow, or later. And obviously, if you see like fishy permissions, like a flashlight app that's asking for access to your address book, keep an eye out for that. You probably don't need the app. And just as a general comment, always check reviews before you download an app. If there are complaints or there are very, very few reviews, that's suspicious and maybe you don't need that one. Now, one little concept that's related I should mention is something called a jailbroken or rooted phone. Now, that will override manufacturer settings, which including security settings. Jailbreaking is for Apple devices like an iPhone or iPod, something like that, and rooting is for Android devices. The vast majority of mobile malware will target jailbroken and rooted phones, and you never want to connect one to a work network, and this mobile device management software we mentioned earlier can detect them. Now, one thing to also realize, when you're using a mobile device, web browsing is every bit as dangerous on a mobile device as it is on a regular computer, and all the same dangers apply. Also, one thing that's specific for mobile devices is what's called a QR code. It's a quick response code. You've seen those basically when you get airline tickets or something. It's something that looks like a small checkerboard and you scan it with a little scanner app on your phone. That's a QR code. If it's coming from, say, United or Delta, okay, it's their ticket. If it's from a source you don't recognize, don't just click on that, because in effect, that's the same thing as a web link. And if you don't know who's putting it up there, you have no idea where it goes. Now, also, one thing that's also related is unsecured Wi-Fi connections and what are called rogue hotspots. That could be something as simple as going into a public coffee shop and using their Wi-Fi, or it can be something that appears as a, friendly municipal network, which is really just an attack meant to look like one. Now, it's every bit as risky as connecting something like a laptop to one of those, in that if it's not a secure connection and it's not encrypted, an attacker can sit there right next to you and just read all the data that's going through, steal passwords, steal data, anything they want, and you'll never know what's happening. As a general rule, a mobile data connection is going to be a lot more secure, certainly, than public Wi-Fi. Now, also what you want to do is make sure that you're using the most current operating system that you can and update it whenever updates are available. Mobile device operating systems are built upon tens of millions of lines of computer code. And on average, mistakes will crop up, say, 1 out of every 180 lines of code. Even a top-notch programmer will make a mistake approximately every 6,000 lines of code. If, hypothetically speaking, a phone has 30 million lines of code, that's at least 5,000 flaws, some of which can be exploited and will be a pretty big problem. Some not so much, but that's a lot to choose from. So you want to make sure your phones are up to date, because when flaws are found, they're theoretically fixed. I say theoretically because Android phones in particular have to deal with a problem called fragmentation. Fragmentation deals with Android as a system is one version. Android then changes based on the manufacturer and based on the specific model of phone and who's actually doing the internet service providing. So let's say you have an LG G4 from Verizon. So you've got stock Android coming out there. First, LG needs to do a version of it for the LG 4. So you've got that change. Then Verizon has to do it so that it's a Verizon version for the LG G4. So you wind up having these two changes on top of the stock Android. The problem with that is that it delays things and they're not as good about keeping them up to date. The closest you can get with Apple to getting something that's stock, so to speak, is using a Nexus branded phone, because those tend to be the direct Android thing and it's not changed for Verizon or AT&T or whomever, or HTC or Samsung or whoever's manufacturing the phone. Apple does not have this problem just because they tend to put things out directly as an Apple device. So you're just going, say, iOS 7, iOS 8, iOS 9, that type of thing. There aren't variants. And I should mention that if you're wondering how big an issue this is, as of January 2016, less than 10% of Android devices on the market were running the current operating system. Another thing you want to do is make sure that you're enabling your passcode lock or PIN. Now, the PIN is generally 4 digits. It's better to use a longer password, and those are really easy to set up in your settings on your phone. And the longer it is, the harder it is for someone to break if they're trying to get into your phone. You can also set up what's called auto wipe, which basically, let's say someone's guessing your password trying to break into your phone. After a set number of incorrect guesses, the phone will automatically wipe out the data on the phone, which is good if your phone gets swiped. Assuming you've backed up your data, it doesn't get stolen, and you can repopulate that data in a new replacement phone, or when you get your phone back. You also want to download a mobile security app. That's more applicable to Android than iOS because security apps are of limited use with iOS, and scanning other applications tends to be blocked. Now, I'll put up a few links related to this, some reviews, as well as some antivirus testing labs. You can take a look and read through them, see which ones are a good fit for you. Now, I mentioned the idea of auto-wiping your device. There's a related concept called remote wipe, in which, let's say your phone is stolen, you know it's got sensitive information on it, hopefully you've backed up your data. You can actually send a signal so that as soon as your phone gets the signal, it will automatically wipe the information on the phone, which is good because if it gets stolen and it's remote wiped, hopefully nothing's been taken from you. There's also software out there which will track the device itself, and a lot of the security software I mentioned will have these features baked in, so you can use that as well. And if you've lost it, you can hopefully find the phone again and get your stuff right back. And like I say, backing up your device is critical to do if it gets stolen, if it gets lost, certainly, or even if it gets attacked. Let's say there's ransomware on your phone. Yes, that exists. You can actually have a backup of the device, and you can repopulate a damaged, lost, destroyed, or bricked, where it no longer works, kind of phone, and you can get your stuff right back. Also, make sure that when you're using your phone, encrypt the phone. Now, Apple products tend to encrypt by default now, Android not so much. It's super easy to set up in the device settings. Just literally, you set it up, you encrypt the phone, it takes a few minutes, boom, the phone is encrypted. How that works is when the phone is off, it's automatically encrypted. So let's say the phone is stolen when it's turned off, it's not considered a data breach by law. Just keeps it a little safer. Now, also related to that, there are some messaging apps which have actually come out with some fairly good encryption now. They offer what's called end-to-end encryption, which basically means you send it, the actual message itself is encrypted, and it doesn't get decrypted till it gets to the person who's receiving that message. One in particular that's quite good is called Signal, and a couple of very popular ones have actually started offering end-to-end encryption recently as well, including Viber and WhatsApp. Like I said, you do want to be cognizant of the access and permission requests you're getting, read reviews, and be excessively cautious when dealing with these unsecured hotspots like in a coffee shop or library or something, and these QR codes. Now, another thing that's related is email risk, which is not diminished on a mobile device. So this means phishing or spear phishing or social engineering, which is basically all tricks coming in from attackers trying to trick you into things, something like a fake email from your bank or a delivery service or PayPal. These can all still come in through your mobile device, and it can be spoofed, which basically means that the address coming in is fake, so that it looks like it's coming from your bank or from someone you know, and it's not because it's appearing that way. So this can appear to come from a colleague, and if it's a colleague or a friend or even an organization where you're wondering, wow, they really send me this? Pick up the phone. Don't go through that same message. Whatever information they give you, you can ignore that, but the name or the organization, whatever it is that you know, go independently outside that communication, call them up, go to a bank branch if that's the case, and find out if it's legit. Chances are, not so much. Now, both links and attachments can be potential threats here. So if you're getting an unsolicited email, even if it's from someone you know, don't simply open them. And unlike a regular computer, you can't always just hover over the link on a smartphone because that won't really have the same effect. So best to check first. You should always presume that any unsolicited email, text, whatever, coming from a bank is fraudulent and contact the organization directly, via phone, via website, via branch, whatever it is. Communicating out of band, so to speak, using a different method is the key here. Now, a related thing is we mentioned the idea of text message. That's called smishing. That's because the proper name for text messaging is short message service, or SMS. So instead of phishing, like an email where they're trying to fish data out of you, it's smishing, where they're trying to get it from you via text message. And that'll have one or more infected links or fake phone numbers, whatever it is. Again, if for any reason you think it might be legit, contact the organization directly. Otherwise, don't trust it. And we mentioned the idea of the unknown sources functionality. Leave that disabled. It's a bad thing. And of course, when you browse the web, some of the threats you can run across, the websites themselves you go to can be infected. If they're infected and you land right on it, that's something called a drive-by download. So you go to it, and if your phone's not up to date, it will immediately attack. Obviously, same thing if you're using a tablet. Now, as we mentioned, both links and QR codes can pose a risk. Now, one problem with the QR code is usually by the time you realize it's bad, it's too late. There is an app out there that can help with this called Norton Snap, which will look at QR codes and read where they go. So if you don't know where it's coming from, run through it first through Norton Snap, because you never want to click on a QR code unless you're sure you can trust the source. Now, also, with web browsing, there's something called SEO poisoning, which is basically a tainted web search result. SEO is search engine optimization. And in fact, after a big event happens, if there's a hurricane or a terrorist attack, generally attackers will put in search terms that relate to that and usually put them in relevant pictures. So that might be something like a celebrity in a theoretically compromised position. They want you to click on it. You click, you look, it attacks because there's malware embedded in the picture. So keep this in mind. If something looks a little too fishy, don't click. So also, one thing that's also related to this is social networks, because your firm should have a social media policy in place, including your mobile devices. They don't always do so. When you're on social networks, all of the same risks above apply. You can get fake messages from there. The equivalent of a smishing attack can certainly come through Facebook. A Cisco study from 2016 actually found that that was the most popular attack they found for corporate networks was actually coming through Facebook. Now, one thing you can run into with those particular networks that can be a problem is sometimes they use shortened links so that you really can't tell where it's going to, and if you try and look at it, it's just a short link. There is a site checker for that from security vendor Securi. That's called Securi's Site Check. I will put up a link for that along with this video so you can make use of it. Now, also, last thing to consider with mobile devices is properly disposing of them. And this will include anything with what's called a solid state or flash drive. That just means the same kind of storage you'll have in a phone. It can be on some computers, and it will be on something like a USB drive. It means no moving parts. Now, the standard for this comes from a federal agency called the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They have a series of special publications called the SP800 series. SP888 Revision 1 deals with proper disposal, or what they call media sanitization. It breaks into three categories: clear, purge, destroy. Clear just means you can't see it. Like if you turn on the phone, you're not going to see what you're looking for. Purge means, I believe the phrase they use is technologically infeasible to recover, meaning if someone's got a state-of-the-art lab, it's still hard to get to. Destroy is kind of what it sounds like. You basically completely wreck whatever it is so that there's no way to get the information because there's no device left. So the methods you would use for a mobile device break down into two basic categories. factory reset, which is basically the equivalent of this auto wipe we talked about, you can actually find that in your settings. And mind you, don't do that by accident because it will wipe out all the data on your phone. That will remove all the data in downloaded applications. Basically, it sets it back to day one when you first took it out of the box. And like I say, you can do that as a remote wipe. You can reload from backed up data later. That's easy to do. And also remember, if you really do want to actually get rid of information, like you're disposing of something, remember to also delete the synced data as well, effectively the stuff you would use to put back in from a backup. Now, one thing to also realize is regular overwriting, which is a type of deletion method in which information is basically written on top of something else, that's not as effective on this type of storage. The reason for that is that flash storage works by storing something electronically, and it doesn't always store stuff in the same place on the same drive. The reason for that is the part where it's storing it will wear out. So let's say you have a document or picture and you stored it 10 times. It's not going to store 10 times in the same place. It could even be 10 different places on the drive. So it would have to basically write over all of that, and it's less likely to work. And the other way to go about it, physical destruction, leave no doubt, and no phone afterwards. So once again, I'm Scott Arnaud, and if you have any questions relating to this or other areas relating to security awareness, please feel free to contact me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn or email me directly at scott@thesecurityadvocate.com. Thanks so much for your time, and stay safe.